As you all know, you have read all the major works we are done with modernism and postmodernism. So we have already talked about T.S. Eliot, but we didn't talk about the major ideas of literary criticism which she gave. And today we will be doing that. And when it comes to T.S. Eliot, he is called as a modernist because he is the last literary critique, like the major one, and after him, the basically the new criticism started. And it is said that T.S. Eliot only paved way to the new criticism because, according to the ideas like theory of impersonality and all, which T.S. Eliot gave, those only became the central point in the new criticism aspects. So, as you all know, that T.S. Eliot was classicist and he followed classical ideas. He followed all those ancient writers and he took examples from them and cited in his own works. Like when you talk about T.S. Eliot, you call him as to be the biggest plagiarist because he is taking all those previous ideas and then putting it in a new form. So there was a term also used for this, which is pastiche. So he is making a kind of an older work look like a new thing in his new work, and he is jotting down all those ideas together to give a whole new work. Okay, so it is not only the fact that he was a classicist and he believed in ancient ideals, he also followed science a lot. So he is also a modernist, as you all know, but a modernist who follows the classical unities, or sorry, not the unities, the classical ideals. So he wrote one very famous essay named as Metaphysical Poets, and you need to know all the important literary critical works written by T.S. Eliot in the chronological order because I have seen in the exam it was asked once. So he has written one essay named as Metaphysical Poets, and that work, somebody is there who is unable to join. I don't know what's her name. I have turned on the Shabnam is there. Uh, I don't know. Shabnam is telling me that she is unable to join. But now she's not responding. Okay, let's continue. So, Metaphysical Poets is an essay written by T.S. Eliot, and it was first published as a review of J.C. Grayson's metaphysical lyrics and poems of 17th century. So I told you about this when I was talking about in the previous class. Also, I told you about the work and from where the idea came, how the metaphysical term got coined. Dryden and talked about metaphysics, and who talked about the metaphysical poets. And every time they used to talk about metaphysical poets, it was in a negative sense. Okay, till the time T.S. Eliot talked about them in a positive sense. So every time the metaphysical poets were discussed, like whether it is by Dryden or by Johnson, everybody took as a them in a negative sense. Okay, everybody criticized them for the use of paradoxes or for the use of different ideas and mixing them together, heterogeneous ideas. So they didn't like it, they didn't like whatever the outcome was. But here T.S. Eliot is one who is liking those things, and he is praising them, and he is also talking about the unification of sensibility in them. So let's see what does he wants to say. So he says that the when he read the work of J.C. Grierson, he came to know that it is about the re-evaluation and reassessment of the long lost metaphysical poets. Because see, after Johnson, nobody else is talking about them. They are just lost, long lost. But when T.S. Eliot started talking about them, from that point, these metaphysical poets became really important. So people started appreciating them after reading the review of J.C. Grierson. This man T.S. Eliot is making a commentary on that, and they just he just said that they are neither quaint nor fantastic, but they are great and mature poets. So the different ideas, like if you have read John Donne and all, so Andrew Marvell, so you must be knowing that they used to fuse different ideas, okay, and they used to talk about the things which are not really very common. So here they are saying that they were neither great nor fantastic. It wasn't that they were great writers, but they were sorry, it wasn't that they were writing very fantastic thing, like which is very provocative and people are totally into that. Till that time they were not, people were not appreciating metaphysical poets. But he says that they represented digression, they thought of different thing during the time, they didn't follow the same norm which all the people were following. And earlier people didn't like them because they thought they digressed from the mainstream poetry. So they how can you think of a compass being depicted as a two lovers, and how it is one will stay at the point focal point and the other will guide it. So these things were not really enjoyed by the people or the readers of that time. But here he is saying that they represented those digressions, and those digressions were very important, very great. Like it was unbelievable for the people of that time to read something like that. And he just gives those three characteristics which they possess. So he says that they elaborated similes, like we all use similes, but they had elaboration of similes. Then they developed the image by rapid association of thoughts, like they were associating different thoughts with different ideas, and nobody was able to do that during that time. And the effect of sudden contrast, like you are contrasting two things, like you are telling to the bee that the bee which you killed, to the lady you are telling that the bee which you killed carried the blood of our body, and it might be like it might impregnate us. So how is it like contrasting the situation? Like he is saying that the bee's abdomen has our blood, and it has united her, it has become the the one which is being the reason for our unity, for our intimacy. So he is taking the definition of Dr. Johnson, and in Dr. Johnson gave this definition of metaphysical poets in the work Life of Cowley. So he wrote that metaphysical poetries are mostly heterogeneous ideas which are yoked together with violence. So what is heterogeneous? Heterogeneous means two different things, and those two different things are mixed together, and they are not like mixing very easily. They are mixed with violence, they are mixed with a lot of effort is being made there to mix them. So T.S. Eliot says it is not only in metaphysical poets, it is also there in the Elizabethan tradition, as this amalgamation was happening where different ideas were being yoked together. uh, Everybody else is not having problem, why she is having problem? She's constantly telling me. Oh,
Ask her to check her network and
yeah,
internet connection,
I'm
I
telling.
think.
I have told her that you can do it by the video. Okay. So, the all he is saying that it was not only in the metaphysical poets in which the ideas were being yoked together with violence. All the metaphysical poets are also belonging to the Elizabethan school, and it is there in the Elizabethan tradition that those ideas were being heterogeneous ideas were being brought together, and they were compiling them in a universal trait. So he says that poetry only does so. It is not only that metaphysical poets were doing so. It is there. It is a common trait of poetry only. And such a poem is also seen as Dr. Johnson's Vanity of Human Mind. So he says that it is also used in the works of Dr. Johnson, the one who is contemplating that it is not there. It is very like not very real to do, a real thing to do. So he's telling that it is within your own work. And Dr. Johnson has failed to see the virtue to fuse the heterogeneous forms of things together in a unity. So he's saying that you didn't understand that unity which they were bringing in by mixing those different ideas together. So like if you are mixing those different ideas together, you are bringing a harmony, and Dr. Johnson has missed. So there only he gives one very very important concept of unification of sensibility and dissociation of sensibility. So let's firstly talk about unification of sensibility. So unification of sensibility is in accordance to the metaphysical poets. Okay, so he says that the all Elizabethan writers or the Jacobean era writers were having unified sensibility they in their poetry, which means that they fused their thoughts and feelings together. Okay, so they not only wrote whatever was there in their mind, but they also fused their emotions along with it. Okay, so when a writer is amalgamating the thoughts and the feeling and fusing them as a single whole, that is called as unification of sensibility. And he says that Elizabethan poet had such sensibility, which is no longer found in the modernist tradition. Okay, so they were not only writing whatever was about their thoughts, they were also mixing it with their emotions. And he says that this unification of sensibility is found in the works of John Donne. And then he talks about the dissociation of sensibility. Firstly he was talking about unification, now he's talking about dissociation. So dissociation is the opposite of unification of sensibility. And he says that it was there in the time of Elizabethan era, when in the Jacobean era, when unification of sensibility was there. But now the unification of sensibility has got lost as the Jacobean era came to an end. And in the poetry of Tennyson, Browning, etc., you can see they can either feel or they can either think. Only one thing is done. Okay, so either they are writing about their thoughts or about their emotions. They are not mixing the thoughts and emotions together anymore. And in he says that in the Enlightenment era also, in the Enlightenment era also, they can only think. Like Enlightenment era is full of thoughts. Okay, it is all about exploration of mind, Enlightenment era. And he says that in the Romantic era what happened, they could only feel, they could not think. Okay, so they could feel, they are feeling the vibe, they are feeling the nature, they are feeling the humanity, they are feeling the emotions of common men, the solitary reaper. So that aspect of romantic era. So he says that these poet could only feel which who were there in the romantic era, and they could not think of any those thought provoking ideas, and therefore they lacked this unification of sensibility there. And then he says that it is there is a very close association between John Donne and the modern age, because after the metaphysical age, the modernist era, like till the time of you can say Victorian era, it was lost, the unification was lost. But now in the modernist poets also, you are seeing the unification of sensibility is there. Okay, so in the modernist era also, they are going back to the ancients, they are going back to the age of Elizabethan era or Jacobean era, and now they are also trying to use those conceits or those paradoxes to make their thoughts combine with their feelings, to make their thoughts and feelings combine, to join them, to unite them. So the modernist writers are also going on the same path which was followed by the Elizabethan and Jacobean people. And it can be seen in the Wasteland. As you know, that Wasteland is not only a uh, uh, thought provoking, it is of course using different conceits and paradoxes, and then it is giving you examples, it is amalgamating various ideas along with emotions. Okay, so it gives you a feeling of sympathy, empathy, it gives you a feeling of pity, fear, where you are feeling like you are trapped in this world. And then it is having all those different ideas. And he says that the modern poets are direct descendants of metaphysical poets. So modern poets are getting inspired by the metaphysical poets, and he says that this continuity was only broken by Milton and Dryden. So he is saying that Milton and Dryden, they were more into following the language. Okay, they were more into following the thought, and they did not follow the soul, they did not follow the emotions, and that's why they only wrote the stuff which was prevalent during that time. So Milton, you'll see, he's all about the uh, prote- uh, pro- he is all about writing about the condition of the country, or the condition of the society, or how to moralize people. But he is not using emotions, or he is not using the soul there. And their works were either had thought or feelings, but both of them were not there in unification. So he is giving the example of Milton and Dryden to tell that from there this chain of unification of sensibility broke, but now it is again coming back in modernist era, because these writers are again using conceits and paradoxes, hyperbole, and different heterogeneous ideas are mixing together. So I hope you got it, and you will not get confused who were related to dissociation and who were related to unification. So unification is metaphysical, because T.S. Eliot is praising metaphysical poets. So they had unification. All the other writer ages were having dissociation. And then modernist, because he is a modernist writer, so he is again advocating the use of unification of sensibility. Then the next work is Tradition and Individual Talent, very important essay, and it is also asked quite a lot, many times in the exam. So tradition,
Himanshi.
yeah.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. So, can you please, first of all, I would say it's a very crisp and very apt notes and very well explained, because I today I was studying the same topic and it took me like a lot of hours to make the notes. So, thank you for that. Also, please, can you name the metaphysical poets, because I'm having little confusion in the names.
So it was John Donne, Andrew Marvell, Thomas Trahan, Morgan. then Cowley, then I am forgetting Cowley. Who else was there? Uh,
So, okay, John Donne, George Herbert, can we call
George
him
Herbert.
as
Yeah,
well? Right?
George Herbert is also there.
Yeah, so John Donne, George Herbert, Henry Vaughan, and Abraham Cowley, Richard Crawshaw,
Yes,
and
Richard
Andrew
Crasher.
Marvell.
Yeah,
And this John Cleveland, is he also a metaphysical poet?
he is said to be a Cavalier poet.
Okay, okay. All right. Thank you.
So, tradition and individual talent is a very important essay. Because it was published in the magazine Egoist, and later on in the Sacred Wood. So, he says a few important quotes in this work. As he says, yesterday when we were talking, so the day before yesterday, so we came to know that. We came to know that that day before yesterday we talked about Arnold, right? So Arnold said that criticism is lifelong process. Okay, lifelong. It poetry, even
Ma'am,
if you are gone, poetry will remain. So even
ma'am,
if, yeah,
ma'am, please can I tell her,
what
tell her all the metaphysical poets name? Can I
what
tell her the
what
name all the metaphysical poets name?
Yeah, you can if you want.
John Donne, George Herbert, Richard Cratchit, N.G. Marvel, Henry Vaughan, Abraham Cowley, Clarence, and Thomas Carey.
Yeah, very good, thank you. And Cavalier poets are also there, which are often confused. So it is Richard Lovelace, Thomas Carey, I guess. Yeah, Suckling, John Suckling, and then
Robert
Herrick,
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 Thomas
Herrick,
Carey,
Herrick is
John
also there.
Stackley, Richard Lovelace.
Yes,
This four.
yeah. And sometimes I saw that there was a writer named as Sylvester, Joshua Sylvester. Joshua Sylvester is also a Cavalier writer. Giles Fletcher is also there. Phineas Fletcher is also there. So they are also Cavaliers. So Cavalier poets are basically the ones who are writing for the from the point of view of praising the court. Okay, so they are focusing their writings on singing the glories of the court. And Edmund Waller is also a Cavalier poet. And there are a few writers who are said to be both the Cavalier and the metaphysical. So, can you name them? Cowley is there. Cowley is the one who is said to be both metaphysical and Cavalier. Okay, so let's get back to criticism. So criticism is as inevitable as breathing. So Arnold said that even if the people die, people die, but even after that, poetry remains. Okay, so he is saying, T.S. Eliot is saying that why don't you call criticism as inevitable as breathing? Because it is as important as breathing. It is as writing literature is so very important for us, for the sake of living in a world, for the sake of living a life in the modernist era. And from that perspective, from that purview, if you see that criticism is as inevitable as breathing. And then he talks about the concepts of tradition. What is tradition? How do we need to follow tradition? It's not simply that we just copy the ancients. Yes, but we need to get inspired by our ancients. Okay, then he gives the theory of impersonality, and at the in the fourth part he is talking about conclusion. Okay, so what is the concept of tradition? So he says that there is a definition of tradition, very important. Seldom perhaps the word tradition appears except in the phase of censure. So he is saying here that tradition is not something which we know as something which we are following since the long time. Okay, so that is our tradition. Okay, we believe in tradition, But tradition is not simply the replication of what is already done. We are following the same thing since a longer period of time, but we are modifying it according to our needs. Like earlier, like how we used to celebrate these festivals in our childhood, and then how the tradition is bit changing. It is modifying itself, like every time, every new year is coming, every new year new kind of a tradition is being formed. So he says that that it is that English likes the poetry filled with newness and uniqueness, and which are not inspired by the predecessors. So nowadays he is saying that the people are really going haywire, and they don't know how to follow their predecessors, how to follow the ideas propagated by their predecessors, and they don't understand that poetry is like, you want newness in poetry, but that newness should be in accordance to the tradition which has been followed till now. So he's saying that a poet is an only an individual only when he is not connected to his predecessors. But the most individual is in which the dead poets are mirrored, according to Eliot. So he is saying that uniqueness and individuality are good things, okay? But it should not be on the cost of the tradition. It should not be on the cost of the tradition which you are following, which you are leaving behind. So he's saying that today's writers want to be independent, okay? They don't want to associate the tag of following the predecessors in along with their name. So they are completely forgetting the tradition. But he's saying a good writer, a most individual writer, is the one who has mirrored the dead poets. Like, he is taking inspiration from the dead poets on the topics which the dead poets wrote, on the topics which those writers wrote, and he's taking inspiration from there and putting it in his writing. That's called as following the tradition. And poet has to work really hard to read tradition. It is not that like whatever is whatever you are reading and you are writing is and you are saying that I have read all the ancient works, so that doesn't mean you are following the tradition. You have to read and understand the concepts they use, the style they used, the unification they used. So he says that tradition and individuality go together, but he is only an individual when when his work is mirroring the dead. And historic sense makes tradition beautiful. So if you are giving it a historical touch, when you are writing something and you are giving it a historical touch, your work will become beautiful. When you are like, if you have read T.S. Eliot, of course, as I always quote, that he's a plagiarist. So he is not like, he is not being censored for being a plagiarist, because he is taking those ideas, he is not copying them as it is, okay? He is modifying them, he is using those things in a new way, okay? So that is what he is trying to say, that you should use those ideas whatever your predecessors have done, and there should not be blind adherence of the past. It's not that you simply follow the past, whatever Socrates wrote, you just copy it down. Nothing like that. He is not saying that. They not, but you should not simply blindly follow the past, and then neither you should go away from the past, okay? So tradition is not following the previous generation. You will get it through great labor. As I told you, poet has to really work hard to read the tradition, because tradition is a study and we choose it from reading by it. So we are reading about the tradition which the according to the norms those works have been written, and we are adhering to it. We are choosing to adhere by it by after reading it, okay? So he says that historic census forces men to write only with his own generation, with whole of literature. Like, what is happening, that in this era, modernist era, people are all concerned about themselves. They are writing all about themselves. They are forcing men, historic senses are forcing men to write not on sorry. So in the modernist sense, they are talking about all about themselves. But when you are writing with the historic sense, it is to write only with, not with your generation, but also with the whole literature. Like when you are writing Wasteland, you are using those historical senses. You are using the protagonist as Tiresias, and Tiresias has been a protagonist in Oedipus Rex, if you remember. So you are not only using the contemporary tradition, but also you are taking the whole literature into it. So he says that from Homer to the modern writers, all about everyone is talking about the similar thing. And historic sense is one. Historic sense is when poet is able to see literature from Homer and to his own generation having simultaneous relation. Okay, so when you are able to see the same connection, when you read Tiresias in Oedipus Rex and then Tiresias in Wasteland, if you can identify with it, then only you are following the tradition. You are harmonizing two different things, you are harmonizing two different eras. And you cannot value literature work alone. See it in contrast with the dead writers, like the Touchstone, if you remember. So in the Touchstone, what he was saying, that take the passages from the previous writers and use it as a touchstone for the new kind of writing. So he says that you cannot value literature alone, and rather than that, you just see it in contrast with the dead writers. Okay, see whether your writing is of that level, of the level of the dead writer or not. If it is, then it is a good work. If it is not, then you are not following the tradition. And he says that the poet should be altered by the present, and the present should be directed by the past. So he is not telling us to write about the ancient concepts. Okay, he is not telling us to write about all the other things which have already happened and already has been written. For example, take Wasteland. He is taking Tiresias there. Tiresias was there in Oedipus Rex. He was prophesizing. He was a very great philosopher. But he is using Tiresias in a new context. He is telling Tiresias about a man who is having a homosexual appearance, like he is a man with a breast, and he's a blind prophet, and he is prophesying about the wasteland, about the kind of the situation which is about to come, and he is lamenting upon the loss. So he is saying that the past should be altered by the present, and the present should be directed by the past. So the past should guide the present. Okay, and it should not be that you are simply following the past. No, it should be only there to guide you. I hope you are understanding whatever I'm trying to say. Because past and present go together. Because according to T.S. Eliot, past and present is going together. Now, the next concept is the theory of impersonality. So, before talking about theory of impersonality, I would like to once again revise the theory of negative capability and egoistical sublime. So, Keats gave the theory of negative capability and egoistical sublime, if you remember. So, negative capability is the capability of an author to remain in the uncertainties, to remain in mysteries, to remain in doubts, without an irritable reaching towards the facts or the emotions. Okay, so negative capability is when a writer does not try to solve the mystery and the loose ends of the story or the text. So he remains in that dilemma, and he leaves the readers also in that dilemma. And some, according to the theory of negative capability, that there are some questions which should be left unanswered. Okay, so those questions should be left unanswered. And what will happen due to that? So due to that, it will give the polyphony to the characters. It will give sorry, polyphony to the text. If you remember that, who has coined the term polyphony?
Ma'am, I guess Bhakti.
Yes, it is by Bhakti. So polyphony is multi-voicedness, okay, where the character is getting a voice, okay, where a character will get a voice and only the author's voice will not be given, okay. So only whatever the author is trying to say is not being heard, also what the characters want to say will be heard, okay. So that was negative capability. And Keats also cited the example of Shakespeare. And then Keats talked about egoistical sublime, in which Wordsworth is always talking about the morality and preaching values and all about himself, and he is putting all his egos in between the works. Okay, that was egoistical sublime. Now let's come to the theory of impersonality by T.S. Eliot. So he says, to give a good poem, one should surrender himself, lose his personality. Like there should be no emotion and feeling of the writer should be there in the work. Okay. So what, like this is the topic which will be taking up a new instance in new criticism. Okay, so this is only the topic which will be there, which will be vaguely discussed in the new criticism. So he says that in a good work, a writer is not showing his personality there. He is not showing his own emotions or feelings. Okay, so he says that the feelings or emotions of the writer should not be there in a work, and the poetry should be impersonal. Their personal feelings should be converted into artistic feelings. Okay, so whatever is being felt by the author should be written in such a way that it becomes a work of art. It becomes a work of aesthetic which the reader enjoys and reader associates with it. So when you're reading one poem, it should not be like that the writer is going through such and such pain. It should be like, I can feel it, I am also going through the same. So that's the theory of impersonality. And see, T.S. Eliot says that T.S. Eliot was never in his poetries. Like you cannot find out the personality of T.S. Eliot in his works. Okay, you cannot understand his personal life while by reading his works, but you can understand the personal life of Wordsworth by reading his work. So he says that Wordsworth was already there, always in his works. And he says that the text should be objective. The poet should give up his personal feelings and emotion and become depersonal like a scientist. So when a scientist is launching a rocket, he doesn't associate it with himself, and he doesn't give it his own name, or he doesn't represent it by his own identity. So he says that it should be there in the poet also, that when you are reading one sad shairi, then it should be felt by you. You should not feel that the writer is in pain. You should feel your own pain by reading that shairi. And he gives the example of a very great example, and this has been asked in the exam also, how he gives the example for chemistry, from chemistry. And he gives the example that to make sulfuric acid, sulfur and oxygen are needed. Okay, but if they aren't there, the conversion won't be possible. Okay, but and the conversion happens in the presence of a filament named as platinum. So the platinum there is a catalyst. Okay, so the conversion of sulfuric acid, like sulfur and oxygen, is getting mixed. So it is very slow. Okay, it is very slow. And to fasten up the process, to make it a bit fast, catalyst is being used. And if you have read chemistry, you know that a catalyst remains the same, and it never changes its property, it never loses its property. So the catalyst is used, like the platinum filament is used as a catalyst to speed up the reaction, but it itself remains unchanged, and it does not leave loses its personality. And the sulfuric acid has no presence of platinum. So sulfur and oxygen are losing its tendencies, they are getting mixed. Platinum is being also used as a catalyst, and a catalyst is a one which speeds up the reaction without changing its own properties or without losing its own properties. So platinum is remaining the same. And he says the same thing regarding the poet. So the mind of a poet is like a platinum sheet, and he says that they should give their full thought and dedication in creating a poetry, but it should remain unaffected. Like the movies which are being made nowadays. So there are various terrorizing movies, like terrifying movies. So it should not affect the writer, okay? It should not affect the mindset of the writer. Once one role is done, the actor should become the same person with who he is. Okay, he shouldn't be like if you have read that interview of Ranveer Singh, in which he says that when he was doing that role of Khilji, he just went on to become and act like that. He used to get furious every time, and he was very violent sometimes. So he says that if you take an example of an actor, they perform several roles and different roles every time. It is totally different from the previous one and from the upcoming one. So what happens that they remain unchanged, and so does the mind of the poet should be like platinum sheet. Like they should give their full thought and dedication in creating poetry, but it shouldn't be changed. Their thought process shouldn't change by writing one work. And then T.S. Eliot is going against the ideas of romanticism and calling it as an escape from personality, as the it is not the expression of poet's personality. So as you know, he is criticizing Wordsworth. And at the same time, when we were talking about Coleridge, so we got to know that Coleridge was talking about the inner voices. He was telling us to believe on our inner voices, and on the, like, poetry is the words of inner voices. So he is in functions of criticism, in the work functions of criticism, he is saying, T.S. Eliot is saying, inner voices of a writer should not come into the work. It should focus on the facts. It should not talk about the inner voices. Inner voices are going to misguide the readers, because your inner voice is saying something different, my inner voice is saying something different, and for you something might be true, but that might be wrong for me. So how can I say that you one should follow the inner voices and present that in a poetry? So T.S. Eliot is constantly going against the ideas of romanticism. Then he wrote one very important and famous work named as Hamlet and His Problems, and he gives the example of objective correlative there. So, the term objective correlative has been used by Washington Allston. It is very important. Washington Allston is a very famous American poet and painter, and T.S. Eliot is redefining it, and he is associating it with Shakespeare and Shakespeare's Hamlet. So, if you remember Macbeth, so Macbeth, in Macbeth, if you know, firstly, I'll tell you what is objective correlative. So, objective correlative is referring to an image or action or situation which somehow evokes a particular emotion from a reader without stating what the particular emotion is. Like, without telling you about the emotion, without depicting the emotion, you are getting to know what kind of emotion is being portrayed. Okay, so he gives the example of lighthouse. lighthouse is the objective correlative in the work lighthouse. Like it is depicting how 1,000 years, since so many years, the lighthouse has remained the same. uh, the world war is going on, but nothing is changing. The house is still idle, and people are going there to spend their leisure time. So lighthouse is a depiction of the you can say it is the depiction of the reality, or it is the depiction of the change which is happening, but the core of the person, or the core of a center of a world is not changing. Then he is taking the example from there. And the best to understand objective correlative is take the example of Lady Macbeth. So, if you know, if you have read Lady Macbeth, Macbeth, so you might be knowing that when Lady Macbeth started getting mad, and she started seeing bloods on her hand, blood stains on her hand, and she used to get horrified by seeing it. Okay, so Lady Macbeth is going through agony, and it is seen and felt by the sleepwalking scene. So Lady Macbeth is simply taking a taper in her hand. Taper is a candle. Okay, taper is a candle, and she is walking here and there, and you will by reading those lines, you will feel the agony which Lady Macbeth is going through. Instead of communicating the emotions directly, Shakespeare has embodied it in a scene, and you can understand the kind of trauma which she is going through, the problems which she is facing, and she is moving on with the taper, and she is not saying anything, and you know that she is having a sense of guilt in her mind, and she is going through something. Okay, but on the other hand, if you have read the play Hamlet, and the character of Hamlet, so he calls it as a failure. So he calls Hamlet as a failure because it does not have any objective correlative. There is no balance between the facts and the feelings. So Hamlet is constantly chanting within himself and telling, I need to do this, whether it is to be or not to be, whether I need to do that, or it is correct, the time is correct. He's about to kill Oedipus something, Claudius. He's about to kill Claudius, but he is not going to do that. He's not doing that. He is contemplating in his mind, it is the right time or not. Then whether he will be going to hell or heaven. So everything he is telling to the audience, and he is making a fuzz of it, like he is overacting. So T.S. Eliot says, why cannot Hamlet be the same like Lady Macbeth and walk with a taper, and we understand that he is going through certain dilemmas? So T.S. Eliot is saying that why Hamlet is constantly telling us about all those things which he is going through. Why it is not being portrayed as Lady Macbeth? Like Lady Macbeth is just simply walking with the taper, and we are understanding that she is going through trauma. So that's objective correlative, where he is saying that the audience and the readers are left confused, because there is no justification for the actions of Hamlet. Why he is postponing the death of Claudius? Is there any proper justification? Just because of his indecisiveness? No. So he says that the Hamlet is the Mona Lisa of literature, a work which is interesting but not a work of art. And Shakespeare borrowed it from Thomas Kidd. The original play had objective relative. So he is saying that the original play, what is the name of the work which from which Shakespeare borrowed Hamlet? If you remember, Ur Hamlet, right? So Ur Hamlet is the original play, and he says that Ur Hamlet has objective correlative. But here, Hamlet is an artistic failure, and because his actions and emotions have no match, he faked madness to murder the king. But it is somewhere getting failed, because it led to the king to suspect him. Even when he is getting mad, people are knowing that he is acting about getting mad. So he is faking it, and people are knowing it, that it is fake, it is not true. And Hamlet's delay is also very illogical. His indecisiveness is also very illogical. And he says that Hamlet was a mature person, but then also he failed to express his emotions. Like, he never confesses his love to Ophelia. Okay, and when he meets to Ophelia, he says, "Go to nunnery, go to nunnery, go to nunnery." Like, he is rebuking her every time. He is putting objection on her mother, on his mother, and then putting allegations on her for having an illegitimate affair. So for these reasons, T.S. Eliot did not like Hamlet. Okay, and the just a minute, break. Then the next work is Function of Criticism, and I told you about functions of criticism. So it is written in response to Thomas Middleton Murray. Uh, just just confirm it to me once. I read it today only, that, but I'm getting confused. It is Thomas Middleton Murray. Okay, so it is in response to Murray, and who is challenging the tradition and individual talents of T.S. Eliot in his work Romanticism and Tradition. So he is favoring the French romantics, and he is talking about the ideals which the romantics followed, and he says that they were great followers of romantics, and he is also following the ideas of Coleridge, who gave the idea that we should follow our inner voices, and Goethe also supported that. So he divided this work into four parts, and the first part is what is criticism. So he's talking about the criticism firstly, and he says that analysis of a work of literary nature with the goal to give proper explanation to the literary text. So the function of criticism is to analyze a work of literary nature and to give proper explanation to the literary text. So whatever is being written, you are giving an explanation for it. And sometimes critique differ from each other from their because of their personal biases. Like, you might not like Shakespeare, and you might be really interested in the kind of writing Dryden used to do. So when you read the works of Shakespeare, you will start criticizing him because you don't like the writing style which Shakespeare uses. And if you're reading Dryden, you'll start praising him for the kind of writing which he does. So he says that all the critiques should cooperate in order to critique in a perfect manner. So when two critiques are sitting there, they should try to cooperate. They should try to bring one middle, like there should be a proper discussion on the merits and demerits of a writer. You should not just put your personal biases, and due to that you just start discouraging one writer. So he says that it should be according to the nature of the work. Okay, so the critique should see what kind of a work is being written, and according to that criticism should be done. And then he talks about the concepts which Thomas Middleton Murray posed, the questions which Thomas Middleton Murray posed, and who said classicism feature is a feature of French, and romanticism is a feature of English writers. Okay, so he said that every time people is telling follow classics, but it is only followed by the French writers, and these English writers, they are following the romantics. But T.S. Eliot says that this is not true. This is not true. the both the classical ideas and the romantic ideas can fuse together and be written in one work. Okay, so as I told you about the unification of sensibility, so T.S. Eliot is always propagating that these different ideas can be mixed together, these different different eras and their perspectives can be mixed together, and it can be worked in a single work. Okay, so he says that there needs to be certain principles on which the writer should associate their work and should go by inner voice. So as I told you of the inner voice, Coleridge has told it. So he says, Middleton Murray says that people should associate their work with the inner voice, and Eliot says then you won't be able to write in alignment to the tradition. So you should follow the facts, you should follow the truth. Why to go by the inner voice? Why to follow the inner voice? And then Middleton says that Arnold has bluntly distinguished between critical and creative activities. So here there is a difference between critical and creative. So he says that Middleton says that Arnold has clearly said that creative and critical abilities are different. But T.S. Eliot says they both are different. I agree with it, but they can both can be used together. So the critical is analyzing a text, creative is writing a text. So a author should do self-criticism according to T.S. Eliot. Like T.S. Eliot is a writer and a critic. He has both the aspects in him, and he says that some writers are better creative because their critical knowledge is good. So T.S. Eliot is also a better writer because because whatever he is writing is already inspired by all those things which he has read. So he has a good critical knowledge, that's why whatever he is writing is of that stature, of that level. And at the time of composing, criticizing it makes work beautiful. So when you are writing, like Horace said, if you remember, write a work for 9 years, then at the end of 9 years revise it and see if you like it, and then publish it. So he's saying while you're writing one work and you are constantly criticizing it, it is making it a beautiful work because you are understanding all the merits and the demerits which has been posed in the work. Okay, so he, according to him, these both the faculties are important. Then there are a few questions which has been asked in the exam, so I'll tell you those questions. Objective correlative appears in, so it appears in Hamlet and his problem. Okay, then the dissociation of sensibility is a term given by, so it is by T.S. Eliot. Then greatness of a poet lies in his powerful application of Arnold ideas. Greatness of a poet lies in his application of his ideas. Okay, so it is by Arnold, but T.S. Eliot is citing that Arnold said this. Okay, then functions of criticism, year of functions of criticism has been asked. Then traditional usually means, so tradition usually means something negative, but T.S. Eliot is using it in a positive sense. Then who talks about poet's working mind as a process of chemical reaction? So it is by T.S. Eliot. Then example of filament of platinum has been used by, so it is by T.S. Eliot. Then in which work the filament of platinum, the example of filament of platinum has been used? So it is by in tradition and individual talent, which is equivalent to the mind of a poet. And then a dissociation of sensibility is set in example of, like from where it started, like dissociation of sensibility started from the works of John Milton and John Dryden. Then progress of an artist is a continual self-sacrifice. So self-sacrifice is being taught to us in theory of impersonality, where you have to lose your personality, where you have to hide your personality completely from your work. Then who has said that Hamlet is the Mona Lisa of literature? So it is by Eliot. Then Hamlet's and his problems originally published in which magazine? Then chemical analogy has been used by, so it is by T.S. Eliot. So that's it for today.